Welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
All right, everybody. Did you hear that echo in there? That intro music? There's 7 layers of sound. I had a sound engineer do it. Don't ask me. I can't even explain it. But I'm happy to be here. Welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. My name is Tom Dutta. Tom Dutta like butter. And I got to brag a little bit, and it's mostly because of all of you. We've been recognized with the following. First of all, the Quiet Warrior Show was rated by FeedSpot out of California as the number 2 out of 30 CEO podcasts. Also in Canada, we made the top Canadian leadership podcast and Million Podcasts. I didn't even know who these people were, but they rate for storytelling. We're in the top 100 international storytelling podcasts. Now, why is that significant? Because of you, because you come here and you watch the show. So give us a like wherever you're listening to the show, and that'll help the analytics. Also, our guests are fabulous, and we have a wait now. We're booked every week in the studio. We're booked for 3 months, and we have a wait list to get on the show. And it didn't start that way when I started the show, so we appreciate you. So let me just take that off the screen and get myself back here. So as you know, you've come to understand as we start the show, before we bring our guests from the green room, I do something called the show hook. Now, this show is live streaming. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, and X. We're everywhere. It'll be produced as a premier YouTube a premier YouTube video, and also an audio podcast, which is in 19 different countries, wherever you listen to podcasts. So that'll come out in the future. So we'll edit and tidy things up. So we're going to do what's called the show hook. So stand by while I set this up. Here we go. What would it be like to hear about our guest deep story from the inside out? What does it cost a child to be born already a disappointment? I want you to picture a small boy in southern Alberta, Canada. He's 7 years old, and his father had wanted a daughter. 7 miscarriages came before him, including a baby girl who did not make it. Then he arrived, another boy. He carries a physical defect. In his words, he's learned to hide. He's bullied at school. He has a brother who treats him like a problem. And one day, his father looks at him and says, "Be a man." How many have heard that? He's 7 years old. That boy, he'll spend the next 60 years figuring out how to wear a mask, I call it, that's thick enough that no one ever sees him cry again. And today, my guest is Reverend. He's a Reverend, a doctor of practical ministry, a licensed minister with a Ph.D. in economics of scripture. 40 years inside the Canadian church, 6 businesses owned across his career, and the founder of the second largest commercial printer between Calgary and Vancouver before he sold it all. Wow. By every visible measure, he won, right? Well, and then on an ordinary afternoon, after 15 years of marriage, his wife hands him divorce papers. He didn't see it coming. Tackled 2 years of suicidal ideation. Counselor sat across from him and gave him a single word. And then 15 years of his life would be spent quietly taking off that mask. Today, he writes books. He teaches courses. He stands in pulpits across the country and tells churches their entire economy is upside down. Wow. The question I want to put to him today is whether the boy who built that mask is finally free of it, and what it actually cost him to find out. His name is Reverend Dr. Stuart R. Watkins. I'll call him Stuart. And he's the author of the Biblical Economics 101, this book, and 5-volume Life is a Test series. He's the founder of New Start Ministries. A reverend can stand on a stage and tell 1,000 people his testimony. He can teach. He can move them, right? But the deeper truths, the ones that actually change us, tend to come in the space between two people who are willing see themselves in each other. Jesus preached to the multitudes. It was with his disciples, the one-to-one, that the real revelations came. So in the next 60 minutes, that is the conversation Stuart and I are going to have. It's going to be great. And you're going to want to stay right till the end. So welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show, and welcome to the stage, Stuart. Welcome to the stage, Dr. Watkins.
Good morning, Tom, and thank you for having me on your show. It's an honor.
It's my honor to meet you, man. And we were just having fun before, talking about everything from dock and carrots to what's on your wall in the background. I want to just throw this out to get us going before we go into Plato's Garden. And so you just heard your own life come at you in another man's voice. And that boy in Southern Alberta, the mask, the marriage, the diagnosis, all the things we talked about. So just help us understand what it felt like in that moment right there to hear that story played back to you, Stuart.
Well, honestly, it was painful a little bit, some of the things you said, but I can very quickly turn that pain into a testimony. So I've come a long way, and that's not to brag. I mean, God is good, and I've been through a lot of storms in life, but I've overcome them, and I'm not suggesting it's finished either. So it's kind of flattering. It's very honoring to the Lord of what He's done in my life. But yeah, it's been a painful life, but you know.
Yeah, I mean, there's a book that you have there. Just hold it up to the camera so we can show everybody and read the title out.
Biblical Economics 101: Living Under God's Financial Blessing.
Yeah, it's very cool, and I have the blessed to get it from you. So we'll be getting into that, but let me ask you, do you want to go into Plato's Garden and tell some stories?
Sure. What do you want me to tell you about?
Okay, let's get this rolling, everybody. So we're going to start this segment. Stand by, Stuart. What would it be like to go into Plato's Garden with Stuart Watkins? Well, here we are in Plato's Garden, and for those of you who can see the screen, there's a picture of Aristotle and Plato, and these guys are walking and talking, and what they're doing is having critical thinking. And I believe human beings don't do it too well because we don't pause and think about our thoughts. But Plato was an Athenian philosopher during the classical period in ancient Greece, and he was a founder of the Platonist school of thought, and that was the academy, from the Greek word academia, and the first institution, apparently, Stuart, of higher learning in the Western world. So what we're going to do today, and you may not even know we're doing it, is we're going to weave your story through three areas. And I call this the influences of context. So one is macro, what was happening in the world around you that may have influenced your public work. Two is mezzo, what was happening in your industry or the sector where you do your public work that influenced. And three, I love this because it's about the man. What was happening in your personal life that may have influenced your public work. Now, what will happen is when we do this, the audience gets to mesh it all together and hopefully discern and find a deeper meaning to your story. So let's get going. I'm going to throw out something and we'll just riff on it. So we'll go into micro first, the person. So Stuart, you were in grade 2, I understand, when your father told you, be a man. Now, some of us have heard that in different ways. So take us into that scene. Where were you and what did you feel when those 4 words came out of his mouth, or those 3 words?
Well, a little bit of family background. Very staunch Anglicans, very conservative, British, stiff upper lip. Men did not hug their children or show any kind of affection, all that Victorian type of ideology. And my dad was, well into his 40s when I was born, so he retained a lot of that. My dad was very seriously injured emotionally from the Second World War, not physically. He was injured physically, but mostly emotionally. And so all that childhood stuff he had, he was very much unloved by his parents. And, it just filtered down. And Dad did not know how to show what today we would call love and affection. He didn't know how. He had a very impoverished childhood. He was a depression baby and lived his entire life. Even though he became wealthy, he still had a poverty mentality. I can speak to that from a spiritual perspective, but that's another show. So I very quickly realized that I was not loved by my dad. And he told me to be a man in grade 2. Well, I was just trying to get through grade 2. So I had a very distant and very hurt relationship. Fortunately, I had a wonderful mother. But
Yeah,
you grow up with identity problems when you're not loved by
sure.
your father and by both of your parents.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to riff back on what you said there. Everybody, just when Stuart said that, come back and listen to this segment. Not being loved by your father. How do we know our fathers love us? And this is where your story and mine have some parallels. So my dad passed away in 2018, and I was mostly estranged all my life from him. He was an addicted alcoholic, but he was a military commanding officer, British Army, and then here in the Canadian Forces, Stuart. And here's the thing. I went through life, and I was always chasing success. I always say I was a self-worth chaser, not success chaser. But when you said what you said, I was thinking about it. My dad, I don't remember how he showed he loved me. And I learned just last year that his father passed away when he was young from alcoholism. And my great-grandfather was an indentured laborer. He was a slave. And I learned all of that. He was missing parts of my identity. And that's when forgiveness came. Not just through prayer, but through understanding that. So appreciate you sharing that. I'm going to put this out there to you. You've written that you carried a physical defect through your childhood. I mentioned it up front, something you hid. And so tell us, if you're open to that, what was it and what did you do to make sure no one ever saw it?
Well, it's a little bit complicated. I was just, without getting into too many details, I'd rather tell you about the mental handicap I had. The physical one was I was unbelievably skinny and tiny, and didn't excel at sports. I mean, I was a stereotype 98-pound weakling through no fault of my own. I mean, I was born that way. And I just used to get teased an awful lot about, being skinny and just being a weakling. But those are the genetics. That's what I had, and that's what I was given in life. What was a
mental piece you just teased us there?
This is later in life, but what happened to me is I got bullied a great deal when I was little, especially in junior high school. And it never ceases to amaze me that no matter what name you pick for your child, when your child gets to school, the bullies will have some way of making fun of your kid's name. And I won't begin to tell you how they butchered my first name, but I mean, I got very badly abused. And even was to the point of being suicidal when I was in grade 9 because of the bullying I got. But looking back on it, there's an expression that says if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, what happened for me as I aged is I had so much protective measure, and I fell into the trap of narcissism. Now, narcissism is a mental disorder. It's considered by the psychiatrist to be not curable, and it's caused from a traumatic childhood. Because there's an expression in life that says it is better to have loved and lost than to have never loved. But a narcissist says, no, it's better to have never loved because that way I won't get hurt anymore.
Yeah.
Because I was so badly hurt, I couldn't get anybody close to me because I didn't want to hurt anymore.
Wow.
And so I grew up with this and didn't even know I had it.
Yeah, let me just unravel some of the things you said. Yeah. First of all, thanks for sharing that. I mean, I said that to you offline because I remember everyone I asked Stuart, how you feeling? He said better than yesterday. And he said, I'm a little nervous about your show. And it's because every time you tell these stories, there's fear, of course, because you're revealing parts of yourself. So we want to honor that. I think also the audience needs to understand that it's okay to say when you're not okay, and it's okay to talk about those things. As it sounds like you're a man who's done a lot of self-work, the psychology piece. It's funny because I wrote down on my sheet here, let me just put another camera on my research. I wrote down here, years later, a counselor sat across from you and gave you a single word, narcissism. Before we go further, help the audience understand what that word means. And you actually told us beautifully. But what's interesting is there are people I know who use that word. They just throw it around. They use it to hurt other people.
It's not used correctly because people say, well, you don't have narcissism. You're just selfish. You need to grow up. Yeah. Well, narcissism and selfishness are not related. Narcissism is an inward hurt so badly that you don't know how to love, you don't know how to receive love, and the way to get over narcissism is actually to go through more pain.
Yeah.
Well, a narcissist doesn't want to go through more pain because they've already been in pain, which is how they got to be narcissist in the first place.
Interesting.
So there is no cure from that perspective.
Yeah.
And when my counselor I went for marriage counseling and every other kind of counseling you could imagine. I had the same counselor for 30 years. And he said to me one day, "You're a narcissist." And I looked at him and said, "What's that?" And it took 2 years of counseling for me to understand exactly what that was. And then another 5 years before I actually started to get better.
Yeah.
My wife and I are still working on this, and there is medically no cure for narcissism. So what I do now with life is I learn how to not react with what my wife and I call narcissistic tendencies.
Yeah.
I could choose to go down that road and behave and react this way, but today, for this moment, God is good. I look to the Lord and I say, no, I'm not going to choose to do that. I'll do this instead. But
yeah,
that doesn't mean it's easy, and it doesn't mean it isn't painful. But
it's a lifelong journey. Let me just.
It's a lifelong journey. Yep.
Yeah, I just changed the view on the screen for those watching, and you can see in the background there. I'm pointing to it on my screen. There's a picture of a human brain. And this is actually a life-size replica of a human brain. I call him Mr. Brain or Mrs. Brain. Sometimes I'll take it when I go speaking. And as I told you, I had a concussion and damaged my brain, and I've recovered for the most part. But what's interesting is when you were talking about childhood and things and narcissism and the diagnosis and the word trigger, a lot of people don't realize that there's what's called generational trauma and that thing there.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And, one of the things you've done really well, and I read your book, and we'll talk about that soon, is you dug deeper into, having a counselor is the first thing, but you dug deeper into how do I live with that? Because you can live well with mental illness from what I understand. So I'm going to put this back to you. Just stay on this word narcissism. So take us back into that counseling room if you can. Yep. How long did you spend telling yourself the counselor was wrong before you let yourself believe the counselor was right?
Actually, that's a very good question, because if you were to ask me what the secret to my success is, I would put it to you this way. Leaving the spiritual aspect out, I would say that I've always been willing to listen, and I've always been willing to learn. So the day that my counselor's name was Don, Dr. Don, I affectionately call him Dr. Don. I said, the day that Dr. Don said that to me, rather than get mad and fight, I just looked at him. I said, "What's a narcissist and what are you talking about?" But I was always willing to listen and learn. And you talk about all the books you have. I have 10 bookcases in my house, and 6 of them are 8 feet tall. I read 1 to 2 books a week. And I've spent my entire life learning. And a lot of it is, I don't read novels and harlequin romances. I read nonfiction. I'm trying to learn something, and I'm always trying to overcome what it is that's wrong. How do I fix this? And I'm taking a course right now on emotional intelligence. You've heard of IQ?
Yes.
Well, this is EQ.
EQ, yeah.
And, I'm learning some of this stuff. At my age, I am still learning this stuff. And my wife's been working with me. We had a little session the other night where I asked her some questions, and I said, I feel this way. What would be a healthier way to feel something about this? And she's coaching me through. She's a social worker by trade, and she's the most amazing woman in the entire world. And she's nursing me through. And at this age, I'm still working. I'm not there yet.
Yeah,
I'm just an awful lot better than I used to be.
Yeah,
narcissism. Narcissism is a very horrible disease.
I like the honesty. And what's your wife's first name?
Her name's Dolores, and her nickname is Dee.
Yeah, so Dolores, she will honor you on for letting us have time with Stuart today. But that's one thing I learned in my life. My wife's name is Anna. I guess we could call her A. They would call her Anna Banana. I met her when I was in the banking industry. And she's born in Rome, just outside of Rome, and came to Canada when she was a kid. And I was born in Britain, but my parents are Fijian. And it's a thing. She's the light of my life. And when I went through my hardship of the concussion and my whole life just stopped, I didn't know if I'd be able to even function. I honestly will look back at that, and she was the rock. We've been married 30 years, and she was the rock. So let's keep going here in Plato's. I'm going to get into mezzo, which is more the sector of where you do your work. Throw this back to you. So, Stuart, the mask a wounded boy builds to survive his childhood often becomes the same mask that wins in boardrooms or on the stage. You built the second largest commercial printer between Calgary and Vancouver, so you were a businessman. Did the mask that helped you win in business also make you a hard man to be married to?
Yes.
Tell us more.
Ask my wife. Well, she divorced me after 15 years, and the main reason was my narcissism.
And so when you're leading, advice to leaders, I mean, you're a leader in different ways. When you're leading people and you have those tendencies, you don't know about it. What do you think the impact, or what was your experience in relationships with other people as a leader of others?
Well, being a narcissist and being self-employed, as I've been for 45 years, is not a good combination.
No.
It just isn't. Because when you're self-employed, it is lonely at the top. And I owned all of my businesses by myself, except for the printing industry, that when I had a business partner. But the rest of them were by myself, and it is lonely at the top, and you have to make all these decisions by yourself. And then you throw in narcissism. The reason I got through to answer your question with the business world is because I'm fairly good at marketing. And, we narcissists, we can charm the birds out of the tree when we want to. So if that comes down to selling my product, I mean, I can sell a rowboat in a desert if I have to.
Yeah.
I don't really like sales and marketing. I'd rather be in charge of the business and hire a salesman. But, you learn how to sell yourself. And I was very good in business. I was well spoken of, well thought of, worked in Rotary and did all the charity thing. I've worked with over 17 different charitable organizations over the course of my career. And so, you put up a mask. We all do.
Yeah.
We all do. But most people would have no idea that I inside was a narcissist. Most people would not know that. I didn't know it. I didn't know I was a narcissist till I was 45. I didn't know what the term meant. So.
No, I appreciate that. And, going back to leadership, which, my background before having my own public practice of training, coaching, doing this kind of stuff, an author as well, that they call them blind spots. And even in my early years of leadership, at age 31, that's when I had my first CEO role running a company. And I had a coach, and she had to deliver some tough feedback. And I remember in a room one day, she said, Tom, she said, you're winning awards, or you're growing the company, everything's good, but you got to change. And she said, there's been some feedback. And she said, sometimes when you're in a room with people, you can be seen as grandstanding and hard driving. And I didn't even know what that meant. But here's the turn in the story. And we talk about pain. What got me to change, and that was a long time ago, was she challenged me, and she kept digging and digging and found my pain. And she kept saying this to me, and I couldn't accept it. Just like you said, you didn't know you were a narcissist. And then finally she was talking, and there was a glass walls in this boardroom. My staff were outside, and she kept giving me this feedback. And I said, stop. I said, you sound like my father. And I welled up. My eyes welled up. I don't cry easy for various reasons, but I had this emotion. That's what it took for her to, and that's the beginning of my transformation, digging into it. So you and I relate so much to your story, and it's courageous. Let me just put this back to you. Of all the wounds you have to write from, you chose money as your teaching ground. Why money? And we're getting into now a little bit of your work.
It's interesting. You can sometimes look at your own children, and you can see characteristics about them at the age of 2 or 3. Like my neighbor 2 doors from me, he's got a little boy, and he's just 2.5, and this kid's playing hockey and just into it big time. They've even got him on skis already. I was an entrepreneur when I was 4 years of age. My parents didn't recognize it because that's a different generation in those days.
Sure.
But I can look back on things that I did when I was 4 and 5 years old, and I was a born entrepreneur, and it's just as clear as a bell. And I started working for myself when I was 23. Because every boss I'd had up until then, you get a job when you're 16 and then you're 19 and you're doing this. And every boss I had, I thought, I can do this better than you can. And so the National Energy Policy came out in 1981 and there was no work. So I started self-employment, and I realized that that's what I am. I'm an entrepreneur, someone that starts something and builds it up.
Yeah.
And I've been doing it all my life.
I'm just gonna and we're riffing here, telling stories, and when you say something, my brain thinks of something. That's what this is all. That's why we're doing this. But back to the brain I got there. I when you said what you said about being an entrepreneur at age 4, my mind said, wait a minute. At age 4, you don't have use of the frontal lobe. You don't know as a kid. You can't rationalize your thoughts and use this whole part of your brain to think. What was it? When you say you were an entrepreneur, what were you doing at age 4? What's one thing?
Well, I'll tell you a cute story. We lived in Calgary, and there was an open, undeveloped field right across the street. And this field was completely natural. And I used to go out at this time of year and pick wild crocuses, bring them back to the house, put them in my little red radio flyer wagon, and put them in a cup with some water. And I don't know what I sold them for to the neighbors, 5 cents or 10 cents or something. But I was always trying to come up with money-making ideas all through elementary school.
Amazing.
All the rest of it. And I was a born entrepreneur, and I just didn't know it.
So now I've got visual. I'm visual. I can start seeing that. It's funny because in all the movies you watch, right, Hollywood movies, you see these young kids at the lemonade stand.
Oh, all the time.
I'm never going to forget the flowers. And by the way, we're international, so we're not just Canada. Just for the audience who don't know, where's Calgary, Alberta?
Well, if you fly, it's an hour and 10 minutes straight east of Vancouver.
Yeah. And there's something called Rocky Mountains between the two provinces, right?
I can be in the mountains from my house in 30 minutes. So I live in a wonderful place.
It's great. I've been to Calgary many times, and my daughter last year, she's 28 now. She just moved back from New Brunswick after doing her degree, environmental degree. And she got married last year to a young fellow, and the parents lived in Calgary. So I'm just blessed that she came back to BC and didn't move to Calgary. But it's a great place. Let me throw this out now and put some on the screen. Tell us what we're looking at there. What's that picture?
Well, years ago, I was attending a charismatic Anglican church, and the priest came up to me and knew I was a businessman and said, "Can you teach my parishioners something about finances from a biblical perspective?" And I said, "Well, sure, I don't see why not, but it'll take some time." And I did spend a lot of time. This is back before the internet was even invented. So sitting at the kitchen table with all these concordances and Bibles open up, and I read through them all, and I made this course, and I started teaching it then. I still teach it now. It's 12 hours long. And then over a course of years, my students loved it so much, they said, "You really got to put this into a book." And I said, "I can't do that. I will never put it in the book." Never say never to the Lord, So anyway, I did have to hire an editor because I didn't really know how to start, but it took a year. And I basically took the course and turned it into a book. It's now in its 3rd printing, and I've just added 4 more chapters because as I learn things, I think, well, I better tell people about it. So
hold it up.
That's where it came from.
Hold it up on the screen there. We're going to do it in stereo. So I'm happy to have received a copy. And there it is. Read the title up because some won't be watching. They'll be listening.
It's called Biblical Economics 101, Living Under God's Financial Blessing. And as you pointed out to me earlier today, it's not a book about financial stewardship. There's lots of books out there from a Christian perspective about how to do a budget and all the rest of it. No, I did a dissecting of the Bible from a business and from an economic perspective.
It's a fascinating perspective. I'm going to throw this to you to riff on. So in that book, Stuart, in my view, you make a strong claim. You write that the church has been teaching the wrong covenant about money for nearly 2,000 years. The Mosaic tithe under Levitical law instead of what you call the order of Melchizedek. So for the audience today who have never heard those terms, for those who don't understand, walk us through the difference in plain language about that.
Okay. Well, for the people that don't know this, there's a thing that we're supposed to be doing in the Christian church. It's called tithing. The word tithe means 10%. And we're to return 10% of our gross income back to God, because the Bible is very clear that the tithe belongs to him. Now, this is basically a test. He's blessed us, got a job, got a paycheck. He wants to know what we're going to do with it. So we're supposed to be returning the tithe. Now, in the Old Testament, the tithe was more of a tax. And it went to the Levites. The Levites would be what you and I would call a priest today. And they were not considered a tribe of Judah. There was 12 tribes plus the Levites. And the Levites were not allowed to own land. And they did all the ceremonial work and putting on the services and doing the blood sacrifices and all the rest of it. So everybody else had to give them an income. So we returned the tithe to them. It started with Abraham and a guy in the Bible by the name of Melchizedek. And no one knows who Melchizedek is. There's a number of theories, but anyway, that's another story for another day. But Abraham met Melchizedek after a successful battle, and he gave 1/10 of all the loot that he'd won in this battle and gave it to Melchizedek, and that's the start of it. Now, in our modern church, there's two important things. People will say, oh, well, that's Old Testament law, blah, blah, blah. We don't have to do that anymore, et cetera, et cetera. Well, no, the order of Melchizedek started before the law was written, and there's references to that in the book of Hebrews in chapters 10 and 11. Now, in the modern world, and I mean the New Testament, by that I mean, yes, we are saved by grace. Yes, Jesus was the ultimate sacrifice. Yes, yes, yes. But we are now under grace. We're not under law, the Levitical law of paying or returning this tithe. We're under the grace of Jesus Christ. And Jesus did say in Matthew 23:23, you should pay your tithe or return your tithe.
Yeah, everybody, I'm going to hold it up here and to give it a plug. You got to get the book. You got to read it. You got to post a review so it's known out there. It's a fascinating read. I'm just going to put another camera on the screen here for a minute. So looking at, I did a lot of reading and research to understand your story. We're going to get into what I call the macro now, which is the impact the world has had on your work. So you've done mission work in Rwanda, a country that lived through one of the most violent genocides in modern history and somehow itself. Tell us about a single Rwandan you sat with, and what did that one person teach you about money, faith, or forgiveness that Canada never taught you?
Well, the biggest thing that happens to you when you go to any country in Africa, particularly the Christian ones, but certainly Rwanda, is, these Christian people, they're just so happy. They're just so happy. They're living the joy of the Lord. We in our Western culture are too stressed out all the time. And they don't have money like we do. And they'll walk 3 hours dressed to the nines to go to church on Sunday on a dusty road and have no air conditioning. And then they'll worship and dance for 2 hours. And they're just the happiest people in the whole world. So what do I learn from them? I learn the joy of the Lord when I go there. And then I teach them, hard scriptures and get into the Bible. I teach theology. I teach economics. I teach warfare. I teach spiritual gifts. I teach a lot of stuff. And they bless me. I honestly believe I come back from Africa more blessed than they are. That may not be true, but I feel that way because they give something to me. They give me the joy of the Lord.
Wow, that's amazing. You made me think of a person I met a long time ago, a fellow named Daniel Agali, who you might know the name. He was a gold Olympian wrestler, Canada. He won the first gold in the Olympic wrestling. And I met him just by chance and had him on my show as well. And he grew up in Nigeria. And I remember he was on my show and he said, I wanted to go to the Olympics. I didn't know what it was. We used to wrestle as kids in the mud pits in Nigeria. And then he said, Stuart, they would look up at the sky and see these big planes. They didn't really understand. They just were told that plane's going to the Olympics. And from my own roots, parents from Fiji, my great-grandfather, India, I watch a lot of cooking shows. And why am I telling you that? Well, it's one of my passions. It's how I stay mentally healthy too. And I was watching a show that was filmed in India by a chef, and he went out and he showed in the camera, all these kids are playing. It's like literally, if you've seen the slums in India, it's terrible. Yeah. They had sticks, they had a little ball, and they were super smiles and they were happy and laughing. And I guess the point I want to emphasize that you taught me here is that you just don't know what you don't know. So if you don't have riches and a Rolex watch, sometimes the stick and the ball is the best thing on planet Earth. So thanks for sharing.
Well, when I was at a church in Rwanda, I saw the kids playing soccer with a Coke bottle, a plastic Coke bottle, because they didn't have enough money to buy a soccer ball. So I went out and bought them one. But they were happy. They were just as happy as anybody.
There's maybe a thread in there, what you just said about leadership. When leaders talk about to their teams trying to be innovative, new ideas. Yep. Well, there's an example of thinking outside the box, right?
Absolutely.
Wow. Let's get back into Plato's here. So we're still in macro. You write, in my words, you write that socialism and unrestrained capitalism are both counterfeits, and that the only real economy is one of stewardship. So we're living in a moment of rising debt, falling trust, economic anxiety on both sides of the borders. What is the real conversation we're not having about money in 2026?
Well, the problem in a nutshell is this, that the world, and we Christians would call it the Babylonian system, it's all based on getting. Work hard, save your money, retire, Freedom 55, he who dies with the most toys wins, and all this stuff. It's what we've been fed.
Yeah.
But when I studied the Bible, and that's, this is where the book came from, is researching in the Bible, is that God has an economy too, which is 180 degrees different from ours, or more accurately worded, ours is 180 degrees different from his. And his system is all based on giving. And you see, he wants to test us, because it says in the book of Malachi, he says, test me in this. He's talking about giving and returning the tithe to him and so on and so forth. And he says, test me in this and see if I will not open the windows of heaven and have so much blessing come on you that you won't be able to handle it anymore. Now, that's the only place in the entire Bible where God says, put me to the test.
Wow.
And I was a pretty redneck guy when I discovered all this stuff. And I said, you're on, buddy. And I tested the Lord, and I have proven everything I teach. I mean, I practice what I preach. I haven't missed a tithe in 40 years. I give away more money in a year than some people make. And I'm not bragging, but I will brag to you what the Lord has done for me. And I get blessed all the time. It's just amazing what happens when you start doing first fruit offerings and all the rest of it. And I just get blessed all the time. It happened this morning, actually.
Yeah.
I went to Safeway to buy 3 items, and 2 of them coincidentally just happened to be on sale.
Okay, there's an example.
It happens to me all the time.
It's a great example of your positive mindset and perspective. Yep. I want to just put another camera back on the stage here. This is my action cam, and I wrote this down after reading some things in the book. I reference it as theological positioning, where you stake your strong ground, in my opinion. And based on what you were just telling us, it's interesting because I wrote here, Jesus was not poor, capital N-O-T. Stuart spends the entire opening chapter of his book making 18 scriptural arguments for this. He believes the poverty mindset infected the church under Constantine was reinforced by 14th century monks and has misshaped Christian relationship to money for 1700 years. And I want to just ask you about the word prosperity, because there's been a lot of press on this about these pastors, particularly American pastors. And it's like, pray and you'll get a house and all this stuff.
Exactly.
How should people who are skeptical about their faith deal with that?
Okay, I'm going to give you 2 answers to the question. The first thing is a very strong fundamental principle that you need to understand, and it's Deuteronomy 8:18, my favorite verse. In fact, I have it in Hebrew on a ring on my finger. I had that made in Jerusalem.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
My favorite verse is Deuteronomy 8:18 says, remember the Lord thy God, for it is he that has given you the power to get wealth. He didn't say get wealth, the power to get wealth, so that you may establish his covenant. Well, his covenant goes right back to Matthew 29:19. It says, go out into the world and make disciples of all men. Now, here's another expression of mine. The gospel of Christ is free. It's open to any person in the whole world. It's free, but it takes money to preach it. So the more money we have, the more money we can plow into buying Bibles to send to India, to finance missionaries, to go over to Rwanda like I do and preach. All this costs money. So the more we have, the more people we can reach with the gospel. But the purpose of money is not to do this gospel prosperity stuff, become a fat cat and see how wealthy you can get. That's not the purpose. And that's where it's been abused by the church. And as you mentioned, a lot of these preachers, send me $1,000 and you'll get blessed. Well, that's not in the Bible. It doesn't say that. No, sure. God has an economic system. You return the tithe, you make first fruit offerings, you look after the poor, et cetera, et cetera. You plant seed, you believe harvest. Yes, you can use faith. I mean, a farmer uses faith. He doesn't go out and plant the wheat in the ground and say, well, gee, I don't know if we're going to get a harvest or not. Gee, I guess we should pray. Maybe it won't happen this year. No, he goes out, he plants his wheat, and he says, hallelujah, I can't wait for my harvest to come up. You can do that with your finances. There's nothing wrong with that. And you can even be prosperous. There's nothing wrong with that where God says you can't cream a little bit off for yourself. But what he wants to know is, how are you spending your money? Are you buying pornography or are you buying Bibles?
Yeah.
What are you doing? Are you asking the Lord every time you go out? Do you ask the Lord, Lord, can you guide me? I do every time. I go to Canadian Tire and I sit down and say, okay, Lord, what should we buy today? What's on sale?
Yeah.
What do you think I need? This is what I think. What do you think? And I walk with Holy Spirit when I go into Canadian Tire all the time. And I just get blessed going in and blessed going out, which is another scripture from Deuteronomy. I live my life like this. And I get it every day. I think it's blessed all the time. But I'm doing the fundamental principles.
Yes.
This is not a get rich scheme. That's not what I'm talking about. It's a matter of how much can I be blessed so that I can turn around and bless others.
Yeah, I think that some of the key messages in the book, and particularly also the Bible, one of the things I want to say about the Bible is when I had my brain injury, the concussion I talk about sometimes, my life kind of stopped. And I was in an executive type level career, income went away. And I spent 2 years night stalking at Costco, lifting heavy boxes of fruits and vegetables, and then a year waiting tables at a restaurant locally serving beer and pizza because a friend of mine bought that restaurant. And here's the interesting thing. When I was a kid, I denied my faith. In fact, in the house I grew up, I was so violent because of my dad's alcoholism. There was a picture of Jesus on the wall. We would come up from a basement and I would look at it. And I hated that picture because I was going like, how can this happen in my house? And I was baptized Catholic, and my dad was a Hindu and then became a Mormon. It was really crazy. Oh. But here's why I'm telling you this. Part of it, I think the interesting part is I didn't know growing up, because my dad didn't demonstrate it, how to love people, how to forgive, how to treat people. When I had the brain injury, true story, I asked my wife to go buy me a cross, and I started wearing it. And I got the Bible, started reading it. And I remember I emailed Stuart, I wish I knew you, because I emailed a friend of mine who's a pastor in Ohio. And I said, John, Brother John, I said, teach me how to read this thing. And he sent me a note, said, don't start there, start here. But I would go to Costco, this is the last part of my story. And I was so stressed, and I would just talk to God. I didn't know how to do it. I'd just say, God, I'm almost there tonight. Protect my body. This is hard work. It's very hard. When am I going to go back to work? And I would just have conversations, and I started praying. I really believe, Stuart, that reading the Bible taught me how to be a better man and treat people. But it also, there were these many, I call them little miracles in my life that happened that got me through that. And I couldn't have done it without relying on my faith. So that brings a question to mind, which I didn't ask you, which I'll get back to you now and comment on anything I said. Is like, you're a guy who was a businessman and you had all these things in your life. What made you turn to being a reverend and go and educate yourself and do what you're doing now? Like, not many people do that.
No, I have a very strange and unusual resume, let me tell you. Well, I was raised Anglican, and my mother made me go to Sunday school. And, you could sit in church and warm the pew your entire life. But that's not what the Bible says. Jesus said, you must be born again. That's what he said to Nicodemus. And then in Romans 10:9, it says, believe in your heart and speak with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and you will be saved. And some people can sit in church all their life and never actually make that step. And you have to live your life for Jesus. So then what happened was, after I, let me back up here. It was 1981, and Billy Graham came to Calgary. And I had no idea who Billy Graham was, but I was unemployed, and they were looking for volunteers, and I went and worked as a volunteer. And, nobody can do it better than Billy Graham. And he said, you may have been in church all your life. You might even be in the choir, but do you know Jesus? And I went home that night and never slept. And then the next day, instead of doing my volunteer work, I went down into the middle of the field and gave myself to the Lord, which is the first step.
Wow.
Most important thing is to get born again.
Yeah.
And then the second step, and I'm going to put this into 3 steps to answer your question. The second biggest thing for me and for everybody is forgiveness, because Jesus talked more about that than just about anything. And the biggest struggle for me was to forgive myself, and I still struggle with that today. And the third thing is to get your finances in order, and that's where it took off from the book. And so after I'd owned several businesses, and I sold everything. And I thought, okay, what am I going to do now? I was doing well economically, but what do you want to be when you grow up? It's kind of a hard question to ask when you're in your 40s. The problem with being self-employed is that every time you sell your business, you lose your job, your career, and your paycheck, and it's like, okay, now what? So I decided to go back to school, and I got a Bachelor of Theology, and then I got a Bachelor of Practical Ministry, and then a Master's, and then my doctorate. And I ran a business part-time just to keep the cash flow going, and that's when I was going through my divorce, and I didn't want to work too much, and that turned out to be just a living hell. But anyway, and I had 3 kids, but you get through all this.
Yeah.
And then one day I was applying to work at a Bible college, and they said, well, we don't hire anybody without a Ph.D. And I said, what's that? How do I get one? And so I actually got a Ph.D. for writing this book, because nobody's ever written anything like this. There isn't another book like this anywhere in the world. So that's how it all started. It was a quest for information. I'm always trying to learn something, and I keep questing all the time to get more education. I'm not trying to impress anybody with my degrees. It's just that I'm a proverbial learner.
For sure. Yeah, let me go back here and put the action cam in the studio. I got a little book here, and I call these Stuart-isms, or now I can call them Dr. Don-isms. And as you were telling that story, and it's what I believe from my own life, I might have said something to you offline in an email, that you hear this phrase all the time: God works through our brokenness. God works in your life and sends you to help people like you. And I really think that a big part of your narcissism diagnosis and the divorce when your wife left, and thank God she came back together, I think all those things position you as someone. Let me just put it this way. In my own doctorate, which I just completed, I studied identity. And my thesis, my thesis, I'd like to share it sometime with you, is called
Please.
The Quiet Revelation: Unfolding Identity in a Complex World. And what I learned and I proved is that identity unfolds in the space between 2 people. You give me an invitation to see in your story a part of me that I don't understand. Right. Yeah. And then we critically think about what's between us, and that creates new knowledge, and we take that into the world. So if we don't have each other, we can't evolve our identity. And all my life, Stuart, because I was a loner because of my childhood, I thought I had to do it alone. And even when I became the CEO position in work, it's like it's lonely at the top, right? So I think
absolutely.
The book is such a great read, and so many teachings. Let me get back into Plato's here, and we're in macro still. So 40 years inside the Canadian church, I think I got that right. You watched it rise, in my words, drift, divide, reinvent itself. In the book, you write about a spirit of religion. You believe it's crept in. So in your understanding, what does that look like in the congregation today in the church?
Well, a spirit of religion, I actually wrote, I think, about a half a chapter on that. I don't know if your listeners know who Peter Wagner is, the late Peter Wagner. He was my spiritual father and mentor for a number of years. And he said to me one day, it was the biggest event, or biggest negative thing, I guess that's the word I want, that's happening in the church today, is we're not believing the gospel, we're believing man-made religion. And some churches are really religious, they do religious type of things, but they're not in the Bible. And you can follow some of your beliefs and some of your rituals, and you can miss God. You can actually miss God. And we get into strife, and we argue about theology, and we do this and we do that, and some of this stuff can be so entrenched in people that they actually miss God, and they're not born again because they're too busy worshiping religion and stuff.
Yeah.
And
I like that, and I also I have these arguments sometimes with my friends about the word religion. To me, this is just how I think or how I learned. I have a one-to-one relationship with Jesus Christ. That's my definition of what I believe. I don't talk about religion because you're talking to a guy, as I mentioned, his father was a Hindu, became a Mormon before he got into the army, and then he became an alcoholic. My mom baptizes us Catholic, and today I practice Christianity. Religion doesn't mean anything to me. It's about a relationship, right?
No, exactly. 110%. You see, Hinduism is 100% religion.
Yeah.
And so is Muslim or Islam rather, 100% religion.
For sure.
And who's the author of all of this? Well, the person that's blinding everybody's eyes, and that's Satan.
Yeah. Well, if you look, even my dad, I remember vaguely because he left when I was 12, but he would take us to these ceremonies, and they would sit and they would chant. But the Bhagavad Gita, I bought the audiobook. It's funny what you said about learning, because I'm like that, and I connected it to my thirst for neuroscience. So I'll just put this back on the screen here with the brain. When humans, I'm just telling my audience, when humans learn something new, there's a dopamine release in the brain.
Yes.
And that's why people pay millions of dollars for courses and keep going back to Tony Robbins, people like that. So I actually was thirsty for learning like you. But what I didn't realize is later in life, it actually helped me find the missing parts of myself. So I was actually searching. And so in the Bhagavad Gita, it's funny how hypocritical my father was, but there's no way that you should treat your wife and your family the way my dad did. And if he really believed in what that teaches, but then comes the drug, the alcoholism. Yeah. And I think that's a part I wanted you to comment on. There's a lot of people who are good people. They're born innocent and golden. They're in mental illness, drugs, alcoholism, addiction to pornography, all that stuff comes in. And I'll just say this and give it back to you. I was watching something, it was a really good thing about a pastor was talking about in his church dealing with young people who are coming in asking about how to get rid of pornography, addiction. So just talk about that. How do you teach and help people using their faith, using, maybe what's in the Bible, whatever, to deal with addictions? Because I really believe that that's one of the bigger problems in the world.
I will answer your question, but I want to pick up on something quick that you said a minute ago. You mentioned Tony Robbins.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to point fingers at him, but all these success guys and all their success material, I've read some of it too, Think and Grow Rich and Power of Positive Think. I've read some of that stuff too. Do you know what I've noticed, Tom, over the course of my life? There isn't one single thing that these guys are saying that I can't find for you in the Bible. Not one. All it is remarketing. That's all. All they've done is remarket what's in the Bible. So save your money. Don't go to the seminars because these guys are charging an arm and a leg. Just read the Bible and put it into action, and you'll find the real truth, and it'll save you a lot of money. Anyway, addictions. I've had problems on both sides of my family with alcoholism. I don't know whether you'd call narcissism an addiction. I wouldn't use that word addiction, but I had a pornography problem when I was a kid, and this pornography thing is huge. It's just massive because it's the dirty little secret that nobody knows about. I can be on my computer, and then all of a sudden your wife comes down the hall, and then you just hit click, and she doesn't know a thing. And it's like that for millions of people. I knew a guy in Dallas. He's since passed away, but his entire ministry was dealing with pornography addiction for pastors.
Wow.
I kid you not. It's a bad issue. Now, how do you deal with addiction? There's no easy way. The only way to do it is simply stop doing it. But you can go through the Bible. You can find the scriptures. You can get the treatment for it. But addictions is a really big issue. Very big.
And
but you still have to quit. You have to quit.
Yeah.
Like if you go to a drug rehabilitation place, you can't start the first day until you're dry.
For sure. So a few things that came out of that last part, all the things you just said, riffing back on this in my story. My father ended up in AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, for 23 years before he died. And I learned Yeah, and I learned at his funeral from people who would come up to me and say, "Your dad talked about you all the time. Your dad helped my daughter."
Yeah.
And I learned my dad would go into prisons and help men and run men's groups and all this stuff. That's who he was.
Yep.
The drug covered up. But I want to
Yep.
just throw something out for the audience here because we're learning. I read a book by Dr. Anna Lemke called Dopamine Nation, and I highly recommend it. And I heard about it through a neuroscientist because, again, I was trying to fix my own brain. And this thing, it's absolutely true that you can't just stop drink. You can't just stop drugs. You can't just stop pornography.
No, you have to replace it with something.
Yeah. And the one thing I learned is the brain is lazy. So, for example, we binge watch crime dramas. We find pornography. And the brain goes, oh, yummy, yummy. Look, I just found something that releases dopamine. This is it. The brain doesn't want to go out and explore the world and find other ways to create that reward system of dopamine. What Lemke taught me is that, man, if you're myopic and it's like pornography is your thing, widen your view of the world. Go in for a walk in nature, doing art, painting, writing down a story of something good that happened yesterday. These are all things that aren't taught to children, and people are addicted. And so I just wanted to put that out there that I've changed my life, Stuart, in big ways. And one of the things on the list is not just walking in nature, like I was telling you offline, but reading the Bible. The Bible gives me such peace, but it's like, oh, I got to read the next paragraph. I wonder what I'm going to be taught next. It is a source of goodness. So I'm going to throw this out.
Well, the Bible says that our minds are to be transformed. Well, transformed by what? Well, renewing it on the Word. The Word of God is alive and sharper than a two-edged sword. And if you renew your mind onto the Word, I'm not knocking AA programs. I'm not knocking any program that's helping someone. I'm just saying it's a lot easier and a lot more successful, a higher percentage of success with people that will renew their word or their mind on the Word of God.
Wow. My goodness. You're such an inspiration, and I want to share this with you because if my dad was alive, I'd want him to know, but he never knew this about me. But after I found out that he went into prisons helping men's groups, I found that out through a friend of mine. Through Village Church that I was telling you about, I joined their prison ministry. So every 2 weeks, I go into a maximum security prison. I sit across from men in red jumpsuits, and they read a book that they selected to their child. We record it, and we send the physical book, the recording, to their child. And it's the most freeing thing to sit with these men who are broken guys.
Absolutely.
And for a fleeting moment, they show you their true selves.
Yeah.
And so I found ways to serve that. I think I share that with you because I see you as a mentor to me with your work you've done. I always thought I was no good because of things in my life. And what I find is by serving like that, I find that I feel better. I also do work for New Life Prison Ministry. So I have actually a student in a prison in Calgary. His name's Michael. And New Life Prison Ministry is out of Ontario. And they have 34,000 inmates in prisons that they send. Basically, you can do courses while you're in the prisons. And so we are instructors. And so what I do is every month I get Michael's assignments and I grade it and I write to him. And I will write in my letter to him a prayer. And some of the things that people tell these inmates are telling us, I can't share it for confidentiality, but it's crazy, man. They're living in these little cells and they're talking about how they screwed up their lives, but they're going to the Bible. They're reading things through New Life, and they're transforming and changing. So, amen to all the work that you're doing. Let's get into the last segment, and then we have something to honor you. I call this the unwritten chapter. You are an author, and we know that from your book. Yeah. So, 2 years ago, a painful part of your story, your former wife reached out, and there was forgiveness. You reconciled. And that is the version most people share. Yep. Tell me the version that does not get shared. What did you have to face in yourself before she could come back? And if you were to write a book about that, what would you call it? That's putting you on the spot.
Well, it takes two to marry and one to divorce. But it also takes two people to have a good marriage. So it wasn't all my fault, and she acknowledges that. She comes from her own set of family problems and generational sin and all the rest of it. But to be perfectly honest, I know in my heart that the reason we got divorced, and she divorced me, I didn't want a divorce. She wasn't able to keep going because the narcissism was too much of a factor. And so what have I done in the years that we've been divorced? I've been working on the narcissism, and not where I want to be, but certainly come an awful long way. When we got back together, she was pretty shocked at how much I had changed. She said, "You're not the same man, are you?" And I said, "Well, I hope not."
Thank God for that. But it's hard. It's the hard work you had to do.
But let me give you a few other things here. Jesus never said that life would be easy. He said that surrender is strength. He said he guaranteed us that there would be storms in our life, and life wasn't necessarily going to be peaceful. But what he gives you is he gives you the power to connect to him. You walk alongside with him, and he'll get you through the storm.
Yeah, absolutely.
And most of my life has been a storm.
Yeah.
But you learn to walk through it, and you get better, and life does get better.
Yeah.
I'm pushing 70, and I feel better now than I've ever felt in my life.
It's all those carrots.
I'm getting better all the time. I'm getting better at it.
Absolutely.
And if you really want to learn something, teach it to someone else. And that's one of the reasons I like to teach, because every time I teach, I get something out of it. So life is not easy, but you carry on.
Yeah, life is a struggle. I put the camera back on here. I'm going to ask you one thing that came out of that last conversation in a minute. But one of my favorite poems or verses is that one about footprints in the sand, right? Where all of a sudden they disappear, and the saying goes about, what I'm talking about, God was carrying you, he was there, but the footprints became two, which was very interesting. So here's the thing that came to mind when you were talking, and it's in the book, the dedication to your 3 daughters. And you mentioned you have 3 daughters.
I have 2 daughters and a son.
Okay, so 3 children, sorry.
Yeah.
So we honor all of them.
Yep.
And the question is, let me just find it again here. My eyes are playing tricks on me. I still have convergence, divergence, brokenness with the post-concussion stuff. So here it is here. Oh, yeah. So you have 3 children who grew up through your, I call it the collapse, and your rebuild in life.
Yep.
They're in the book dedicated.
Yep.
And they're also witnesses to everything. And here's the thing I always used to say to my mom, I used to say this to Mom, why did you wait so long to divorce, Dad? Because we can't unsee what we saw, and that trauma is there. So what's the conversation, if you're comfortable with this, you still have not had with your 3 children that you think maybe you will have one day, if anything?
I don't think I have anyone now. I would have 2 years ago, but there's been an enormous amount of healing and reconciliation. My eldest daughter was married a year ago, and married a wonderful young man, and my relationship with her was always a little testy, but it's a lot better now. I just saw her last month. She lives in Chilliwack, actually, and it's getting better. And my other daughter has a wonderful boyfriend, and we're still working things out.
That's good. And I think that's a good answer for anybody, because if you had not answered that question, as you said, it's lifelong journey when we have to do our self-development. So there's always something that we might need to say to our children. It's a continuing journey. Here's the last question, and this is a segment we call the Warrior's Torch.
Yes.
And so the last guest left a question for you. They didn't know who you were, and it happens to be a fellow who's a cardiologist, doctor, very well renowned, published author, who's turned the world upside down about the medical system. So this may not be a question you can answer about the U.S., but here's his question he wanted to ask you.
That isn't Dr. William Davis by any chance, is it?
He sounds like a good guy too. No, it was Dr. Peter Cowie.
Okay, sorry. All right.
So Peter said, and by the way, we said give us a universal question that people can generally comment on, not gender specific. And the question was, if you could change one thing about the medical care system in the United States, what would it be? Answer that from the perspective of the Canadian system, what you know about Canadian healthcare.
Well, the problem, I've had a lot of experience with the medical field because my son has had some some issues,
Yep.
special needs issues. So we've had lots of experience in the medical field. The problem with the system, it's not the people, but it's the system itself, and it's actually the education, because what's happening is, this is a little bit rednecked, but I'm from Alberta, so bear with me. They teach doctors how to write prescriptions and do surgery. They don't teach preventative maintenance. I know more about vitamins than most doctors do. They don't know how to look after the temple of God, which is the human body. It's a temple according to the Bible. And they don't teach us, because they're not taught, how to look after the thing. And so if I could change something, I'd go back to these medical schools and I say, you got to start changing what you teach. You got to teach doctors how to keep people healthy, not trying to fix things after there's a mess.
That's very cool. Great answer. And I know that, Dr. Coe, you're going to watch back and see the answer. So thanks for answering that. And now we're going to ask you to give us a question to ask the next guest. I won't tell you who they are, but something that I can ask that is universal and maybe a deep thought question. What
Has anybody ever told you you're a tricky host?
Yeah, no, nope. Now they have. If you ask me that again, I'll say, you did. You just did, Stuart.
What's the question?
Give me a question to ask our next guest. So this is where we.
Well, who's the guest?
I won't tell you. You come up with something universal that would get somebody thinking about something that matters to you. It can be anything.
Okay, but are you even going to tell me what subject they're talking about?
Nope, I can't.
All right. Then I'm just going to play your own game then. Okay. My question to them is this: have they made Jesus the Lord of their life?
I love it. Let me just write that down here. Stay with me for a minute. I'm writing on my paper.
Hey, two can play at this, you know.
I like that. I like the narcissism in you coming through.
I can use it positively, you know.
Yeah, I know. Say it again. Have you
ever made Jesus the Lord of your life? And if not, why not?
Have you ever made Jesus pardon my slow writing, Lord of your life? And if not, that's a great question. Why not? And the interesting part to me is I can position that with a lot of credibility, because I won't say who you are, but I will say what you do in the world, and it makes it credible. So thank you for that. And now we're going to honor you with a couple of things. So are you having fun still?
We can keep talking if you like. I can come back and we'll do another show. I don't mind. It's great fun.
Absolutely. The isms are growing in the book here. So let me put something on stage, and then we'll introduce this. And this is where you get to sit back and relax and just enjoy. So let me put this on the stage. Can you see that? It looks like a screenshot of Amazon.
Yes, I can't read it too terribly. I can see some of the picture. I can't read it, but anyway, yes.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about that. And let me just see if I can.
I know what you've done. Yes.
Let me see if I can find it in my paper here. Just give me a second. Hold on a minute. Okay. So let me just. I'm gonna be a little rude and turn my head, because I have to look at a bigger screen. So what this is, everybody, and we'll just set it up here. I'm revealing a 5-star review for the book that Stuart's been talking about. So just stand by while I do this. So hold on. I'm revealing today a 5-star review for the book that we've been talking about, written by Dr. Watkins, Biblical Economics 101. So here we go. And by the way, Stuart, the thing I don't like about Amazon is it shows you my shopping habits, but there's nothing bad.
Well, I was wondering that was there. But anyway.
See, the interesting thing is we have a lot more in common, because you see there's omega-3 fish oil, so the supplement, there's no pornography.
I was about to say there's no pornography. I'm glad of that. That's too funny.
And I look after my gums if you can see it. All right, so here we go. The 5-star review. The title of the review is The Book The Church Never Taught Me. It was reviewed and posted on Amazon. It's live May 5th. A business associate passed this book along to me, and I expected another stewardship book, but I did not expect to be challenged on this many of my own assumptions. Dr. Watkins does something I have not seen many Christian authors do. He bulldozes. He goes above the poverty equals piety mindset that quietly haunts so many believers. And he does it with scripture stacked page after page. You can't easily argue with 2,000 verses. What stayed with me most was the chapter on the order of Melchizedek, if I said that right. I've sat in church most of my life and never once heard a sermon that tied tithing back to Abram, the bread, the wine, king of Salem. Watkins makes a careful case that this older form of giving was always meant to be the better one. The 18 points showing Jesus was not poor will give you something to think about long after you close the book. So will the 31 ways to open the windows of heaven near the back. That section alone reads like a checklist of a business person can actually use. There's also a quiet honesty threaded throughout. Watkins admits he sat in church for 16 years before he understood the difference between attendance and surrender. He calls himself a rednecked Albertan who almost walked out of his first charismatic conference because he could not handle being asked to hug strangers. That kind of plain spoken humility made me trust the rest of what he was teaching. If you have ever felt the gap between your bank statement and your faith, this book closes it. Pick it up, read it, and understand, underline as you go. Congratulations on your 5-star review.
Wow, I'm very touched and honored. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. And to everybody, get the book. But here's the thing, authors know his work's not known unless you post a review. The sales reps who talk to the bookstores and all, they see the buzz on the book by the reviews. And so you want to get that done, not just read it. The last thing now we're going to do is award you something. Did you know you're getting an award?
No, I did not.
Well, now you do. If I ask you that again, you're supposed to say, Tom told me.
Oh.
All right, so let's do this. There's something caught my attention when I was reading that review. There's so many things I could tell you about. I wrote this down because you mentioned the Billy Graham thing, and I don't know why I wrote it. I was supposed to use it. It goes like this. It's on the paper here. This is a story from what I learned. The night at the Billy Graham Crusade in Calgary, 1981, he volunteered at the book table. He thought give the invitation meant they were ordering lunch. The next night he went forward. So I just thought, I read it and went, what an idiot. He is an idiot. But
that's where I was in those days in 1981.
Totally.
Billy Graham says, or the instructor says, now when Billy Graham gives the invitation, that's
right.
Your time to go down to the book table to sell the books. And I thought, invitation to what? Lunch? I mean, I had no idea.
We still watch, my wife and I watch all the classic 30 minutes every morning of Billy's sermons. And at the end of every one, he asks people, I have a good friend, Terry Whalen, which I should introduce you to. He's my publisher is Morgan James Publishing out of New York, and they have a faith line of books they do. And they are all about faith. And he actually co-authored, or he wrote the memoir about Billy Graham. Terry did.
Yes.
And he taught, and the book's really good. And they brought in the audiobook. They brought in music and things from this. It's a wonderful read. But let's get back to what the order of the day here is. So have you heard of challenge coins before?
No.
Okay. So we're going to just teach the audience and you. This comes with it. It's inside the little package. So the history, challenge coins surfaced during the World War I era. The practice of carrying a coin designed specifically for a unit was popular with the Army Special Forces. Carrying the coin at all times and presenting it when challenged to prove affiliation with that unit resulted in a number of consequences for those who could not produce a coin. The most popular required the coinless soldier to buy a round of drinks. That apparently is still popular today. So these coins are carried around the world. AA has a version, first responders, people collect them. So when I started the podcast, I've done over 350 long form interviews now. I didn't know where it was going to go, but I wanted something for the top 1% in the world, in my opinion, that took something in their life painful, turned it into something to teach. So the front of the coin, they're hand painted and crafted, is the Quiet Warrior Show image. But the back is the journey, the hero's journey, which is the narrative behind the show about story, how we go and take our pain, turn it into something good. We search until we come back as a guide and a teacher. So congratulations and welcome to the community.
Well, thank you. I'm extremely honored. Wow.
And we'll get your address offline. That'll come to you. And if you lived here, I'd meet you and give it to you. And all I ask is you take a picture somewhere meaningful to your story, holding the coin with an iPhone or something, and you send that to me. I'm collecting those. So on that note, Dr. Watkins, it's actually been a pleasure. I want to give it to you for the last word before we run the exit music.
Well, I don't know if I'm supposed to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Do it.
Okay. I still teach my biblical economics course, and everybody gets a copy of the book. I work with pastors. I come into a church. It's 12 hours long, and I do not charge. I take up offerings to run this ministry. I've had New Start Ministries for 15 years. I've never taken a dime out for myself, and I have no intentions of it. But this book, folks, will change your life. I practice everything I preach, and I've been blessed going in and blessed going out. This is God's economy, and you need to know it. Then I started writing a series called Life is a Test. It was written as a daily devotional. In other words, you only have to read 1 page a day. You just read 1 page. That's it. And it's 365 pages long. But it's not a devotional. It's a book about wisdom. It's called Life is a Test, Hope in a Confusing World, a daily dose of wisdom and spiritual insight. I write about everything. In other words, these are 365 little sermonettes.
Wow.
And so
That's
you want
awesome.
a daily dose for 5 minutes, you get one of these. And I started with one, and I've just published volume 5.
Amazing.
So there's 5 of them.
And by the way, everybody, don't read it on a leap year. You'll be disappointed.
No, you read February 28th and 29th, both on the same day.
Okay, I got it. I mentioned I did a TED Talk. You know, the date of my TED Talk was February 20th, February 29th, 2020, a day in history I'll never forget because it's a leap year. All right, well, thank you. And everyone, find your true passion like you hear from Stuart here, and find your purpose and live life with passion and purpose. And we'll see you all again next week on the Quiet Warrior Show. And Stuart, thank you. It's been an absolute treat.
It's been a blast. Not what I was expecting. You're a very unique host.
Well, thank you for that. I'll have to find out what
that was a compliment, by the way.
I'll have to find out what you really mean by that when I filter it. All right. Thank you, Stuart. Stand by.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca.
Okay, stand by. We're just going to take it offline. We still have, we've had people watching from the beginning. They're still here. I can see on the dashboard. So we're going to end the stream now. Thank you, everybody, for being part of this. Let's just take that off the screen.